lovely glasses. But I want to ask you, if you're on a deserted island, but in the
Yeah.
metaverse, and you have three objects you can bring with you, what would it be?
So I'm in the metaverse. I'm on a deserted island and three objects. Well, see, here's the thing with the metaverse. Whenever I'm in the metaverse, I've always got these clumsy things in my hands, these controllers, right? Like, so I've been looking at the things you can do in the metaverse. I've got my Oculus, my Quest device, and I've been playing with it because I want to explore this thing. And there's this whole space where they're like, well, you could do productivity, you could have a meeting, you could type. And I'm like, how am I supposed to type? I'm holding these controllers in my hands. I can't like I can't actually think without a keyboard right now. This is gonna be weird, but the actual thing I would probably have is something I can type with because typing has actually become part of how I think right now. So like metaverse, I am in a computed world, so I know that I could do input and things. So I'm gonna want a keyboard that actually works, despite the fact that I'm holding two controllers. That's my thing number one. So like this is my like one of the things I'm thinking about here. So this is my little play thought. I'm just gonna go with me for a minute. I know this. I'm totally
Sounds good.
breaking the question you asked me. So so as we're understanding more about how the brain works, we had this idea, like this is the control center of the brain. All cognition happens up here. But the more that like the cognitive scientists, neurological scientists study like what's going on in the body, the more we realize there's cognition that happens in the gut. Like there's actually a ton of
Oh,
cognitive cells down in your gut and your digestive system. And in your hands, there's a ton of cognition cells. So there's actually like neurological activities happening in your hands. So we spend like here in sort of like let's say the part of the world where we talk on Zoom and have access to technology, that strata or that geography, whatever however you want to slice that up. Most of us have spent like the last 100 years learning to type and think with our fingers, right? Like so, like that's actually when I'll talk to my team and I'm like, I have half an idea. I'm gonna have to go sit and like write this out. Like I got to write to think it out. Used to write like this, but now we sort of write like this. But the thing that happened in the last 10 years is we all switched to these mobile devices and like social
right.
media, texting. So like the number one way we communicate is now using our thumbs. But we spent
Mhm.
100 years like training our brains to work with these fingers primarily. And all this thing was it was like the drummer hitting the space bar, right? That's all it did. So we've now delegated all our like our greatest intelligence and communication to the dumbest finger we have, our thumbs, right? So I think that's a description. Like the one thing that hasn't learned to think yet is where we delegated all our most essential communication because we all type in a mobile phone now. It is. So yeah, so that's my first one is I would have a keyboard on that island so that I can actually think because that's how my brain works right now. And the brain is a part of the mechanical body, right? So keyboard is the first thing. Second thing in the metaverse, what do I need here? I need um gosh, like objects seem so like you don't need objects in a virtual world, right? Like they just everything is objects. So I would want something with which I could make changes to objects. I would want to be able to like manipulate the objects around me. So I'm gonna want like I don't know, I'm gonna want an axe. I'm just gonna want to be able to slice stuff up and so I want like whatever the metaverse equivalent of an axe is, because you're on an island. I'm gonna need to build shelter, I'm gonna need to build like fire, I'm gonna need to like create things. And an axe is a really useful tool if you're just like in the wilderness. It cuts, you can hammer with it, you can shape things, like the objects around you. So I'm gonna want a keyboard and I'm gonna want an axe because that's like some way to manipulate. And then finally, I'm gonna want like a lighter because you're gonna need fire too. Like you're gonna want to make a fire at some point. Like you're on an island. It's a deserted island. It's gonna get cold at some point. You're gonna want to eat something that you don't want to eat raw. So you're gonna want some fire. So I figured between a keyboard, an axe, and some way to continuously make fire, I'm gonna be able to live on that desert island for quite a while. Even if I need to boil water, etc. You're gonna want fire. Firewood. That's my three things. I don't know that that's necessarily well thought out. And to be honest, based on like the fact that I brought a keyboard with me, I'm not sure I'm going to survive on that desert island. But the good news is I'm in the metaverse, so I can just take my little Quest 2 off anytime I want and come back to reality and just go to the fridge and have a snack. So there you go. That's my three things that I'm going to bring on a desert island.
The combination of the items are so vastly far away from each other.
I didn't have a pre-planned answer to that question, so that's just weird. So this tells you
That
something
was
about how my brain works. Yeah,
spontaneous.
yeah.
It's funny because it's like it's such a confusing question because it's like you imagine just you're on a desert island, but the laws in the metaverse are completely different than the laws
Yeah.
in reality.
Ali, what would you take with you? Like, what would you have?
Um, three objects. I don't know. Maybe I will bring Mark Zuckerberg with me. I'll have Elon Musk on my side, and then for entertainment, I'll have a comedian or something with me also. So there you go. Yeah, exactly. I'll
There you
bring you
go.
alongside so we can do podcasts in the metaverse too. Walk around with a microphone.
Ali,
There you go.
Ali, I don't know what I don't know what it says about you that three objects are humans, but I think it means you're a social being, right? Right. Like
There you go.
you thrive on connection, social, and being with other people, which is why you host a podcast.
Exactly.
Oh
What about you,
God,
Said?
me?
Yeah, Saeed,
So
what's your three objects?
the first one has to be a 3D printer, because
Oh
then
yeah, there you go.
I can just build stuff. Becomes like I'll make it easy for me to build, so I'll make it like Lego structure. So it's just
Yeah.
like plop plop. 3D printer, what else? Shit.
Generator.
Yeah, yeah,
Got to run your 3D printer.
that's true. And maybe like a weekly supplies of things I can use for the 3D printing. And then from there I can just live on. I don't know. I
There
hope
you go.
I'm hoping the 3D printer saves me, you know. But
And you're hoping there's a food source on the island.
Yes, exactly.
damn it. Yeah. How
Yes,
how big is this
tricky.
island?
Yeah, it's so tricky with the whole metaverse thing too, because it's like the digital world. It's based off our world, and things are very similar, but it's also very different, right? And
Yeah.
there's so I don't know, like, what's your take on the digitalization of our world and all the different factors of it? Like, do you see
Well,
it as a net positive, or what do you say? Yeah, what's your take on it?
so like we're in it. We're in this. It's I think it's one of the most essential questions we could be asking ourselves right now, because we're
Hmm.
seeing like change that we haven't really seen before, right? Like things are changing in ways, and at a pace. Like we things used to change slowly. You like the Industrial Revolution took decades. Maybe like a century to really sort of like start to have big global impact. And we're bringing in new technology where like in 5 years, like in 2005, it wasn't common for everybody to have a like mobile computing device where you could interact with the internet. We had text messaging, like we had T9 where you could sort of learn to sort of like talk to your mom kind of fast and figure out, something, or like talk to a friend and find some directions. But like the way we communicate now and our ability to communicate at scale, um, it takes society like time to learn the rules, of how to function, and we haven't had a lot of time to learn the rules of how this works. So I think there's just a great lack of literacy in digital communication. So I live in a space, so professionally, I live in a space where I'm trying to help government digitize and do things online and provide services because I genuinely believe it's a great, efficient, effective way to deliver a lot of the things that government does. You can run government more cost effectively with more equity and more access. And at the same time, you see like crypto, and you see sort of the whole Web3 movement, which is sort of this idea that there is this evolution of kind of how digital experience is going to work. And what I'm curious about, especially, let's go to the metaverse specifically, right? So it's this really interesting technology, but you're in LA, so like you're surrounded by the film industry, and you see the cost and the complexity, and and the art and the craft that goes into the production of a great film experience to create 2 hours of cinematic immersive experience. We can spend $100 million to create 75 minutes of entertainment where you feel immersed in it. Someone has built a world, they filmed that world, they turned it into like a visual artifact or like a digital artifact. Essentially, it's a viewer experience, it's not an interactive experience generally. So then you have the metaverse where to some degree you kind of need to have the same production values. You need to spend a lot of money to do world building. You look at the video game industry as sort of like an evolution of film where this is now an interactive experience. But again, you spend all this money to create this, and then we're going to create the metaverse, and we're just going to let people out, and they're going to sort of have you know, all these social experiences and these immersive and these interactive and these cinematic experiences. So I think my favorite example of like where I think the metaverse is fascinating, but also like I'm not totally sure how it's going to work, you know, is, you know, like, so I've got the my meta, you know, gear here, you know, and I've been trying it out. I just want to explore. And there's a YouTube app in Facebook's metaverse, right? And so the YouTube app is you're standing in a room and you're watching a 2D screen. Like I'm just watching YouTube, but like someone paid all this money to have this device and all this hardware and all the software and all sort of this environment. And like, in what way is this like a metaverse experience? It's just a really clumsy way to watch what I could watch on my phone, right? Like, is it better? Is it different? So I tried to figure out like what is the cost to elevate, you know, really not a good experience. I would say like watching YouTube, like I suppose if me and a friend were there and we were sort of talking, we would have social interaction while we watched a funny video or something, or a TED talk or whatever we were watching. I suppose I could have both of a mixed social, but like I think people who talk while I'm watching a movie are kind of rude. So I don't know that I actually initially want that experience, except for certain kinds of things, like maybe TikTok was one where like there's sort of a social experience built into these little nuggets of like, I can't believe that guy did that thing. I can't believe she drank that food, or that, what a cool recipe, you know, like there is sort of moments for social interaction. But I sort of try to figure out like in this immersive experience, you know, what is the value it brings to me as a human being to sort of add all this complexity and all this cost? Because it's got to be something better than what I can get, not by putting a heavy goggle on and holding these things in my hand and, you know, setting my perimeter and kind of building this whole little world thing. Then you look at like something like Ready Player One and that evolution where people like really do live a social life, and like that, like they actually become, you know, the concept of the digital twin. Like I am somebody else in this world, and I can actually have experiences. I can get a suit where I have tactile experiences. You know, maybe at that point, you know, maybe at that point. But I'm curious whether we can spend our way there, right? Like what kind of artists do you need and programmers do you need? You know, like what kind of an army of digital makers do you need to create these spaces? You know, in Ready Player One, it sort of looks like this was all done by like two nerds who got very rich doing it. You know, like they just made this world. They're like, no, this is like thousands of artists and illustrators, and you know, you're building digital sets and you're building characters and you're building physics laws, you're building rules engines, and you know, like there's a lot that goes into making these things. You look at just the team that builds just Facebook just to create like a thing where you can, you know, share silly memes, and then like you need to build an entire 3D world. So where I'm both curious and skeptical, and I don't really know where to live on it. Is how are we going to build all this? Who's going to build this? What's the revenue model? How are you going to pay for these people's salaries? You know, like is advertising really going to pay these bills, or am I just going to be you know, a brand new kind of a digital product? So I think about these things because I live in a world where I make software. I'm like, who's going to make it? How are you going to make it? How are you going to make an experience that is sufficiently immersive? You know, where my old CFO used to say, you know, you want to hope that the juice is worth the squeeze, right? So like,
Yeah.
this is a big squeeze to get enough juice to make the metaverse work. I'm just curious, like how we're going to do that. But it's fascinating. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, I think, is making a fascinating gamble. Clearly, it's making his shareholders angry, right? Like people are skeptical about
Right.
it, and I can't tell whether he's going to be a genius on the other side of this, or have, you know, just sort of burned down one of the most valuable companies in the world, like Elon Musk is doing right now, as it appears. But again, I don't know that on the other side of this with Twitter, like he's saying he's going to be,
Who knows?
you know, cost neutral soon, and maybe he's onto something, right? Like maybe we were doing it wrong before. And he sees something about how to run a company that the rest of us don't see. So I don't know. I'm not as smart as either of those guys. I don't claim to be. And so I'm sitting back and going, I'm curious how this is all going to work out. How are you going to get there? How are you going to build these worlds? You know, so yeah, it's an interesting time looking ahead and trying to imagine what it's going to be like and how we're going to get there.
I think an interesting point on how the metaverse is going to be sold to more people is the idea of it being more immersive. They keep selling us this term where like this is more immersive, this is more like it will activate your senses even more than your normal life. So it's like an escape in a sense.
Yeah.
because you want to be more immersed, you want to be more included and put into that situation that you're watching. It's not just like a screen anymore. Now it's the whole thing. It's your
Yeah,
whole vision.
yeah,
So you get more involved, and then because our emotions are so fucked up at the moment in this generation,
they are. Yeah.
everyone's just trying to find a new way to be stimulated. And I think that's
Mhm.
how, this future of living is gonna look like. It's gonna be the actual thing.
Yeah. So I did a meditation app. There was a
Yeah.
meditation app that was, a lot of folks playing with like mindfulness, and can we use this as a way to kind of reboot your being in the present moment, right? Because as you said, like we're all looking for stimulation right now. We're the
Hmm.
stimulation generation, you want more input, but like the actual way your brain is wired, like we need sleep because that's the point where our brain takes all the experiences and the stimuli we've had and starts to like sort it and like put it into long-term memory and make sense of it and like connected to the known universe and the other things that we know to be true. Like I had all this stimulus today. I read all this news. I saw all these videos. I had all these interactions with people. I learned all this new information, and you got to sort of like map it out. It's like that's what sleep is for. And then like meditation
Hmm.
and sort of mindfulness is some other kind of a waking version of that, which is about learning to regulate emotions, right? Like we we've got all these these things going on in our body and brain that drive us and that cause us to do things we probably don't think about consciously, right? Like it's like the car is driving itself. We're not necessarily driving the car, and that means we're not always getting where we thought we were going, right? Sometimes we let emotions drive us. So meditation is this other thing where you just literally learn to get the steering wheel of your own car, and have it in your hands. That's sort of what the purpose of it is, to vastly oversimplify meditation, mindfulness. Um, but so I did this meditation app, and I'm in the metaverse. And one of the scenarios it put me in was I was like floating out past this cliff, right? Like I'm out like a 200 feet above like a beach, or like because some of us are not in America. I'm about 100 meters above a beach. Some of us can speak the metric. Um, so I'm there, and I sort of looked down, and I had a genuine, like my stomach dropped, like it was just realistic enough, and I'm like, that was actually kind of cool. Like I had a genuine physical sensation looking down and just seeing somewhere below my feet, I'm just floating in air, and it feels like I'm gonna fall, right? I thought, okay, that's really cool, right? Like that did like absolutely shock me into the moment I was in. I was completely immersed in the moment because I had like that, like just a visceral feeling of being in that moment. Um, Most of the moments I've had in the metaverse aren't quite like that though, right? Like there's a little video, one of the sample videos, someone's like climbing the Matterhorn, and so you're following, you're in camera view, you're sort of in this immersive view. There's two guys who are hiking the Matterhorn. Um, and you just sort of sit to look around and up and down and see some of these cliffs they're scaling, and they walk you to a little hut on the mountain. You can look around the hut and see things. That was really cool too, but it wasn't quite that same visceral experience. I think I'm curious how they're going to maintain that level of experiences that create that emotion such that we are immersed. Um,
Mm.
but I think there's like, if we can figure this out, like there's huge potential here for helping people to think more clearly, helping to educate. But also, there's danger in that. We look at sort of what social media has done to us, and we've kind of lost the ability to just have conversations without shouting at each other. So because we are in that highly stimulated emotional space, so people just everything is anger and everyone is my enemy. Or if you align yourself with this part of some idea, you must be in an opposite camp to me. Then all your thinking must be colored by this one opinion. Therefore, now we have to fight. Now we're in some sort of conflict, or I have to protect myself from what I believe you might be communicating to me. So that's social literacy. Like, how do we function in that space? That's not going to be trivial. Just as a species, our brain takes a while to learn how to do things, and you need a lot of information. You need a lot to learn the rules and the etiquette. Um, so I'm really curious, like, how as a species we're going to function as we enter, like, we've had so much change so fast, and we're not doing very well with it generally. Do we even really need this? Is this good for us? Like, how long will it
Mhm.
take us? And I am not by any means a Luddite. Like, I'm into tech. I want all this stuff to work. I'm interested in it. But I'm like, I want it to really work, actually. And
Mhm.
so how will we regulate it? What is acceptable to do? Like, do we want laws in the metaverse? Do we want there to be law? What can you do to me? What can you take from me? How are you allowed to
Mhm.
treat me? And if you violate like the rules and the social laws in the metaverse, what is the extreme beyond which I want people around me to intervene and say it's actually you're bullying this person, or you're stealing from this person, or you're doing something that we consider to be unacceptable, to this other person. You've violated a norm or a taboo. You're beyond what we in this society will accept. How are we going to create those laws? I think so there's philosophy opportunities, right? Like
Right.
there's some interesting conversations we're going to get to have. We need our next Marshall McLuhan to come and tell us, about what this medium is messages. It's I don't know, I'm fascinated. I think it's going to be fun, and it's terrifying and exciting.
And
So I want it all. It's great.
We need ancient Greece to return to recreate democracy in the metaverse.
Right?
oh
Yeah.
goodness. Well, yeah, it's not because you can't just leave it up to the technology. The technologists, they do what they do great, right? They create tech,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But these questions of laws and ethics and society and morality and creating, like, what is the new life, right? What is the new
Yeah.
laws? Like, it's an alternate world. I don't know, do we apply the same rules as in this world? In that world?
I know.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
which routes would they take? Like, which country would they follow? Presumably I'm assuming it's gonna be the US. And if
Yeah.
other people
Yeah.
from other countries want to join in, they don't
We
they don't follow the same rules. They're from a different country.
absolutely. Well, so I'm in Canada. So Canada is, like, I don't know, 70% the same as the US, but where we differ, there's some major cultural differences in terms of like the art that exists in Canada. Canada, so I one of the ways Canada and the US are different, and you can argue that it's a strength or a weakness. I'm not here to make a value judgment on this,
Yeah.
but I think like in the UK you'll see some of it, but like social responsibility is something that we owe each other something, that society, that government, that like healthcare is a good example, right? Like there is a belief in certain parts of the world that we owe each other healthcare, right? Like that is sort of one of the purpose of society is there's like we don't want anyone to get too sick, even if they haven't earned the money to pay for the doctor, right? Like we want to make sure everyone has a certain level of health and well-being. There's sort of this concept of a social safety net, and in America, and again, as I'm trying not to make a value judgment here, but like the sense of personal responsibility, of personal autonomy, independence, is equally a cultural value, and so just that idea that do we owe each other something, or are we each responsible for our own autonomy and our own well-being and our own income? Those are philosophical concepts. I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong, but they've created very different societies. So now we move into the metaverse. Who's making decisions about that, right? And then you move farther afield and sort of like to the Western world, and you start to look into like China and the Middle East and Japan and Australia. We look at India, and there are very different cultural belief systems operating there. Different ways of like what your family, what it means to be a father or son or a daughter or a mother, child. Like all these different roles. They're very different concepts. And so one of my good friends is from Egypt, and he came to Canada to work in tech, and we used to work together. He's got a 16-year-old daughter. And so he comes from a Muslim tradition. He comes from an Egyptian family tradition. And he's got a kid who's like got TikTok in Canada. He's like, I don't know how to parent my own child. She doesn't respect me the way I had to respect my dad. Like the social code is radically different. And that's just TikTok, right? That's just looking at videos. So, we're going to bring these social codes into an encoded world. And someone's got to write the rules. Someone's always writing the rules of how this thing works.
I think
it's
that's
code. Like it's being created.
I think something that could work is just using maybe a similar model to the UN, but less in a less corrupt way, I guess.
Are humans capable of that? Is our species capable of that? Can we do that? I don't know.
If AI is going to be involved, and there's like, going to be set rules applied without the intervention of humans, maybe, yeah, it could work.
But the rules are written by humans in the first place,
Yes, but
I don't know.
If an AI is enforcing them, it would be different.
But AIs are written by people, right?
Mm.
People write them. People choose what code goes into the system in the first place. They choose, it occurs to a person to write an algorithm, a rule set, a library, a body of training data. People make those decisions, and people in a particular culture make those decisions. So like we may not know until it's too late. Like there's an old I've been told it's a Korean proverb. Someone from Korea can correct me if it's wrong. If you did not grow up with this proverb, but I think this one comes from a lot of cultures. If you ask a fish to describe its environment, it's going to tell you about everything but the water, right? The water is the thing it
Yeah.
takes for granted. Like, oh, this is the rules. The physics of my universe are that everything floats and I move through 3D space up and down. And, whereas the rest of it is like, no, that's if you put me in water, I drown and I die and I think, right? Like that's not, eventually, like I can swim a little bit, but not, not forever.
Yeah.
I do need oxygen, so like what is going to be the water of this space? It will have impact on us, right? We will be impacted by the structure of this thing, by the decisions that get made, by what you do and don't turn on in this space, And so like the UN's great. Like if the UN is the best effort we ever had to have like a global regulatory body that makes decisions and sort of sets rules across cultures and across nations and across, economic systems, and it's not working that well, I'm just curious how we're going to do this in a metaverse where we're making it really, really fast in real time. A lot of money's going in there, and no one is looking at like what are the ingredients that are going into this soup, right? Like, are those ingredients we wish to consume? Am I allergic to some of those things? We're just innovating and things. You brought it like tech. Tech by definition is how, but not why, right?
Okay.
It's always how. It's all it tells us is how we're going to do something. But like Simon Sinek is like, his golden circle is like at the center, you always have to have why. The companies that thrive have a really good why at the center of why they're doing it and what the purpose is. I'm just curious, like, what's the why of some of this technology? Where is it actually taking us? And if that's unconsidered, we're going to be inventing it later after we built a world and a whole universe, and we're going to try and catch up.
It'll
So
be too
there's going to be
late.
some interesting philosophy. Well, we're always a little too
Who
late at
knows?
certain things, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
but like it'll be. I'm curious to see where this goes.
Yeah, and there's no way to predict it either. It's like I feel like any predictions we're gonna have, who knows what's gonna be like in a few
Yeah.
years in terms of like anything digital, cryptocurrencies, artificial intelligence, digitalization of everything. It's such a I don't know, it's a terrifying terrifying thing to think about. I guess we just what's some advice for us? Just I'm trying to I love tech, and so I love
Yeah.
adopting it. Anytime any new tech
Oh
comes
yeah.
out, I'm using it. I'm like, okay, I want to be on the the forefront of it and stuff like that. But I also, it's one of those tricky things, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
who who knows down the
Well,
line if that was the wrong decision or a right decision? Who knows, right? That's
so I,
life.
but I think before we started the podcast, we were all talking about music just a little bit, right?
Mm,
And so that was sort of one of our ways into the start of the podcast. You're talking about music, so I think the way out is punk, right? Um, so music got really commercial at some point. Like we had the Beatles showed up, and like
mm.
these big mega groups. No one had ever seen anything like this before, and they made money making art that no one had ever made before, right? People like, oh my gosh, you can make a lot of money writing a song. Who knew, right? There was this massive commercial industry that exploded, and this idea of like a superstar like Elvis Presley, right? There hadn't been really an Elvis Presley until there was an Elvis Presley, and it was he was a cultural phenomenon. He was a generational phenomenon. Everybody had an opinion on Elvis Presley, and everybody probably had an Elvis Presley record in their house, and every radio station played it, and every movie had an Elvis song in it, and it was a huge economic engine. He was an economic engine, right? Um, and it moved really fast, and people were saying like, "Well, he moves his hips in a seductive way." That was imagine when that was shocking, right? That a man can
Yeah,
wiggle his hips was like that was a social taboo. You didn't do that. We're miles beyond that now. Um, but then you get punk a couple of decades later, where people are like, no, let's take that music back, let's make it ours. And I think that move to like for humans to democratize things and break them and make it messy and like make art and like try stuff out and get experimental. I think that's what's really so. We talked about grime, right? Like as a musical genre, and it's about breaking rules, and it's about being messy, and it's about exploring like what kinds of sounds can I make, and what is the visceral human interaction with these sounds, and can I turn this soundscape into like a song that actually has sort of like a logic to it, and it can like walk somebody through an experience, because like A song is a little world you can build, right? You can make, you can bring somebody in and they can have experience connected to that song. And for the rest of their life, they'll remember the experience connected to the first time they heard that one song, whether it's like the first time you kiss your partner for life, or the first time, you make out with somebody, or the first time you drive a car too fast on the road, listen to something, that experience of danger and whatever. Like childhood experiences and music are connected, and we bring these things with us. So I think like the secret to this is people got to start making art again. Where's the punk rock? Where are the people who are getting messy with it? And I think the only place where there's this can be the interesting tension, because the people who are making these worlds, they own it like a marketplace, right? Like they set the rules, they're the gatekeeper. And I'm a fan of Apple. I think they make great products, but one of the great tensions right now is, should Apple be the gatekeeper for everything? Like they get, they've got a pretty clean virus-free ecosystem, right? Like it's a pretty secure ecosystem. I can have commercial transactions there pretty safely in their world because they maintain all the rules. But I grew up in the 80s, and I remember like we were not okay with too many rules in the 80s. Like that's when punk sort of showed up, like 70s really, but like it really came mainstream in the 80s of like, let's mess things up. And we were all into William Gibson and like sci-fi that was all about breaking the rules and what happens when this great ordered world we're trying to create, the gritty underside and the ways it breaks down, the way humans kind of like move through the cracks and kind of take over the neglected spaces. So I think what's going to be really interesting with tech is where like the next generation who shows up, they're digitally literate. Like they grew up with this stuff, they know it. And I want to see what like the version of punk rock is in the metaverse, when people just start to take it over and make messy noises and make something really broken. And I think that's exciting. So I want to see what happens when the tools get democratized a little bit more and everybody can make parts of the metaverse, and that's going to be really cool. I think that's where we'll save ourselves. It's going to be punk rock that saves us in the end.
So will we be listening to new sounds in the metaverse? Like
I
will there
hope
be sounds
so.
like we've never heard before? Something
I
you
hope
just
so.
created?
Yeah. New instruments, right? Like none of us in our desert island talk, none of us said we wanted to bring a musical instrument along. Maybe that should have been our first one. Is I'm gonna need something. I'm gonna need to make art, because like in theory in the metaverse, I don't have to keep warm. I don't have to feed myself. I don't have to be a parent. I don't have to do anything else. When I'm freed of everything, what do I do? It's weird that I didn't say I would make art. Maybe I should have said that. So I guess I did say keyboard, which could be connected. But yeah, we're gonna need new instruments.
I see
What
what you're
would
saying.
Yeah, what would be the instrument that you'd like to create in the metaverse?
Oh wow! So I think we want some sort of like the virtual theremin. Like the theremin. It's like it's sort of like it's a wand. It's got an electrical field. So it's like in the original Star Trek theme. That's that little or like
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not singing through headphones on a podcast, but or the Beach Boys the famous blanking on. I can't believe I'm blanking on a Beach Boys song. That's like I grew up with this. So theremin is this weird electronic instrument, but like it was one of the earliest synthesizers, right? So it was essentially a rod. You would actually manipulate it by moving your hands through the electrical field, and it would create these
Hmm.
tones. It was sort of like a mono kind of synth, essentially. So I'd be curious, like in the metaverse, one thing I have is I'm embodied there. I have my full body, and and I like motion, and it knows where I am. So you could create full body synthesizers that anybody can learn to play, and you can make
Wow.
weird sounds. You can modulate, and you can compose. So I think there's an opportunity for musical instruments in the virtual world that we haven't seen yet, and for a kind of person who maybe didn't like grow up with money to own a guitar or to learn the piano, or sort of traditional instruments. There's a barrier, or a cultural barrier, or just there are instruments that I have never had access to. I don't have a dulcimer because I didn't grow up in the southern U.S.
Yeah.
Or wherever they have
It's
dulcimers. I don't have Middle Eastern instruments because I didn't grow up in that culture. I don't have Japanese instruments. So when I can get access to everything and I can make instruments no one's ever seen, what kind of tools am I going to make to create art with?
it sounds like you're creating a superhero with all those synthesizers on your body and stuff. It's like the new metaverse superhero. It's like
I'd love it
music.
if this new superhero was an artist. I think that would be promising for humanity.
Yeah. Wow. it's so different than what we have right now. That's the thing is that, and like you're, there's no limit, right? That's the wild thing about this whole metaverse thing is that as creative as you are, you can create the tools out there and change the world and do whatever. So yeah, I
Maybe
don't know.
that's maybe that's though,
Mhm.
but like so Ali, that I think like maybe that's the one thing that so far that's missing in the metaverse is I can't build it yet. I can't author the metaverse, right? I can't make the new instrument. I have to wait for Mark Zuckerberg commissions $1 billion project to create a thing, or some startup makes a thing that they get into the into the store, into that experiential space, or when even when Apple comes out with their version, I'm gonna have to wait till they create a marketplace for app developers for metaverse, right? And you're gonna need huge teams of software programmers to create this stuff. The interesting one will be if the technology gets to a point where just I, as an average person on my own, I can start to make things that didn't exist before, and I can actually author, like authoring tools, I think might be the difference. So that brings back to punk, that
I
ties
see.
in music. And so that will be
See,
the
mhm,
ultimate evolution of the metaverse is when individuals can make it themselves.
right. But at the end of the day, like metaverse is like it's a company, right? It's a business.
Yeah.
You don't like it, you go with the competitor, right? Or you just choose
Yep.
nothing at all, right? That's like, and that's what's gonna keep it, I think, like competitive and stuff like that. And new ideas are gonna keep, hopefully, unless Mark Zuckerberg monopolizes everything. But I'm curious about how this is gonna work with like digital governments and that kind
Yeah.
of asset because in that sense it is a monopoly, right? Because it's the government. You don't choose how, and then
Yeah.
I do think maybe like here in the United States, the government maybe is a little behind on tech. Like yesterday, I was at the DMV. I was waiting for like 2 hours to do to get to
Yeah.
renew my license or whatever. And so like if there was a way to do it smart online and stuff like that, and I had on a portal where I can get my taxes and my tax refunds or all that, that would be the smart thing. Like if Facebook can do it, why can't my government do it?
Yeah.
But at the same point is that I don't know if the government does it, then maybe there is no other option, and that's the only option. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on it.
Yeah. So like there's so many reasons why government is behind on tech. Most of them
Mhm.
aren't good reasons. Like I'm not here to like as an apologist for why government is slow, right? Like, but it is
Mhm.
it is really, really, really hard. But government is, it's an interesting thing because it is both. You could say it's like a monopoly, right? Because they sort of own
Mhm.
everything. But also government, if you sort of like flip it, it's just government is us, and it's the people we've delegated to organize on behalf of us, right? When it's working well, and I don't think it often works well. We could point to the United
Mhm.
Nations. We can look at, especially on the political side of government, where people are trying to win power over government, really, to say, do I get to make the decisions on behalf of you, the taxpayer, the citizen? Um, so there's this fight to sit in the seat of power. But if you sort of step back from that battleground of, which is really a battleground of ideologies often, um, or at least cultures often. Like below that, there's like a whole administration that's like just trying to operate the roads and like run a driver's license system and make sure that like people on roads are properly licensed and have passed our test. And if you have a habit of driving a vehicle dangerously, we can take that away from you or we can fine you. So there's this whole structure of like the legal and the administrative and the regulatory side of government that is a system we've created on purpose and by choice. That's the framework of our society, right? Now, I think government gets to a point when there's too much government, too much power, too much control. People start to feel like, maybe I'm suspicious that like, the FBI and the CIA and all these Homeland Security and this whole security mechanism, is it really in my best interests? Is it letting me have autonomy and live a free life as an individual? So constantly in this sort of weird power battle with government itself and control. And when you have to wait in the DMV lineup, it's like, this is who would do this on purpose? Like who would build this system on purpose, right? Um, so we all have these different relationships to government, but like I think the evolution of government and so is going to be that government's going to become more like software, more like a metaverse, more like a world. And I think it's a really interesting parallel to say like, okay, Mark Zuckerberg is overbuilding a metaverse, which is going to be a world with rules and boundaries and guidelines and probably penalties if you violate certain rules. You'll get booted off. You know, you're in jail in that you're not in the social society anymore. You've been pulled out of society. You don't get to play in the free society anymore. You're going to be in some kind of a jail, which is just not in the world. That's kind of what jail is. You're out of the world. You're locked away. You know, you're not in this society anymore. Um, so we're watching someone build it. But, you know, like we can sort of look back and go, it's not that different. Like we're actually just doing that in the real world with government. Government is that. We're building the rules, we're building the laws, we're setting the boundaries of our society with government and the mechanism for operating our society. You know, we need roads, we need some schools, we need hospitals, we need things for society to function. We need traffic lights. You know, so we pay taxes and we delegate people to do this on our behalf. And those people were constantly in battle. Like, how much money should they have? How many resources? Will they do good things with it? Will they do bad things with it? You know, we put people in charge, and it turns out people aren't that smart, and they do a poor job of governing. And then we get angry at them, and we put somebody else in charge, and it's still just more humans, you know, being imperfect. And so, you know, we're creating this world, but like when you get to like software and digital and tech, like I think software is an interesting model for government. I think eventually government will be more like a software company. And the country in the world that has most gotten there is Estonia. You know, Estonia is the one
What?
country where, yeah, oh yeah. So Estonia is a digital society. So partly the unfair advantage that they had was when the Soviet Union fell apart and they became an independent state again. It was sort of the 80s. The internet was just like early days. We had technology, which we didn't have at the start of a lot of other countries. So like technology existed, and they're not that big. Like they're like just over 1 million people in all of Estonia. You know, Tallinn, the capital city, is not that big a place. But they decided they were going to become a digital society by default. So digital identity, they've got like the most advanced software platform in the world for digital identity. You know, you have an identity, and like banks use your digital identity that the government gives you. That's how you interact with the world. And when they write a law, that law is written in software, right? So like everything is software. So Estonia has this cool, because you know we see what's happening in Ukraine right now. We're in like early 2023. So like Russia and Ukraine are in conflict. Russia is invading the Ukraine right now, and um, and Estonia is like right there too. So they're very aware that like there's a large and potentially hostile nation right next to them. So Estonia has this idea of a digital embassy. So every like birth record and marriage record and death certificate and legal contract, everything is encoded as software, including like your identity and who you are as a citizen of Estonia. So they actually have a digital embassy in the UK. So the way that they've operated is they say if we get invaded, we're simply going to move our entire government and society and everyone's identity to our digital embassy. We'll operate out of the UK. And when we retain autonomy of our country again, because they plan to, if they're ever invaded, we'll restore a society from a backup.
Okay.
Right? So that's digital government. That's the evolution of where government could go when software and actual code is how, because we are building our world like it's code. If you look at how code is written and how we build rules and regulations, eventually these things can come together. I think that's what's potentially really interesting with the metaverse. But Estonia has done that. And you see other places like Taiwan is doing some really interesting things around digital government and actually like we're encoding ideas. Laws are code, right? And eventually code is just encoded, right? Like somebody's actually written it down and it runs, right? It operates. So like digital government in the future and the way we write software and code, eventually these things come together and our world runs like code, right? That's potentially the evolution of where we're going.
Yeah,
So the
you have,
metaverse, while it's an experiment, is actually becoming a little more real than we think.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
I think you also have
Said,
other
last
examples of it.
question, Said.
Yeah, I
We're
just want
almost out of time, Said. Oh my goodness.
I just want to increase on this, add to this point about how it's also showing in other countries in different fields. So, for example, you have El
Mm.
Salvador adopting e-commerce through
Yep.
the use of Bitcoin,
Yep.
and also during COVID, the medical field had to go remote. So, in a sense, digital to a certain degree because they had to create platforms for
Yep.
for patients to use on when they can book appointments, and they basically adopted that and kept it. and now they're
Yeah.
reinforcing it. So I can see the conversion you're talking about, because like a lot of countries have adopted this in their medical field.
Yeah.
Like here in the
Yeah.
UK, if you want to talk to your GP, if it's not an emergency, they'll just give you a call. They'll keep it a call appointment.
Yeah, because we've realized, we had this old idea. So one of the projects my team did recently, so in the province of Alberta, where I live here in Canada, if you get a speeding ticket and you think you don't deserve a speeding ticket, you can contest the speeding ticket. You can say, I want to book a court date. I think that, I don't know, there's a tree over the stop sign. I couldn't see it, so I blew through the stop sign. I got a ticket. And I think it was actually the city's responsibility to trim that tree so that I could have seen that stop sign. I don't think that's my fault. That's an example of what you can do. So you can contest a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
So we were tasked with building a digital version of that so I could contest that ticket online, right? So we had to go on ride-alongs with cops. We had to go sit in courtrooms, understand how that system works today. Because you were taking the idea, so there's this idea that a judge has, which is, I witness you. You come into my courtroom, I look at you, and I judge you as a person standing in front of me. And there's a very encoded belief system of I have the power to make a judgment over you. Are you telling me the truth or not? Are you a good person who just made a mistake? Or are you a careless person who deserves to be punished? They're actually making that adjudication in real time, and they look at you and they make that decision. We were tasked with digitizing that. So we had to convince judges that they were going to be able to do this essentially by email, or like a digital system that was about equivalent. We got there, right? We got it working. We built it. Everyone agreed. Yeah, if the evidence is there, if the rationale is there, it shouldn't matter whether I see you or not. That's a major cultural change, though, to get a judge to agree that they don't have to see you, because that's their worldview. That's what they're trained in. That's their culture. Is you come into my courtroom, I witness you, you present your evidence, I adjudicate. And now we're saying that's a digital interaction, and it works for traffic tickets. Does it work for murder? I don't know. It's gonna be a long time before we're ready for that. I don't think we're gonna do murder judge trials by email. But we are doing medicine now, right? And we're doing other things. Before we said, a doctor has to see somebody. You have to see the body. You have to interact with the body. Maybe not. So we're in real time exploring this move to a digital society. It's happening. And the pandemic accelerated it by 2 decades, probably. They're changing people's belief system. That's powerful. I think some really exciting things happen. I think we got to pay close attention to it as well, because we may not always get what we want on the other side.
That's very true.
Wow.
And this was another episode on A2 the show
Yes,
with
you
Paul
can wrap up.
Bellows.
I'm so confused as to how I'm gonna live my life from now on. Should I invest more time in the digital world, in my digital consciousness, or in my real world? Because I have a really
Make
nice
art.
real life.
Yeah, make art. Just make stuff. Make things. Create things. That's what humans are for, right? Make stuff up. That's it.
And that's Paul Bellows' advice for you guys. Don't forget to keep creating and follow, like, subscribe us. We salute to the camera and peace out.